Hello, everyone. Okay, wow, that mic's effective. Welcome to this session. It's called Everyone's Skint. Why are we advertising to them? Which is pretty self-explanatory, I suppose. We all know the sort of economic situation we're in right now, with the UK inflation hitting a 40-year high this year. We got rising fuel, food prices. It's all pretty bleak. With advertising with its raison d'etre of driving consumption, you might think it's not the most helpful industry for people right now. But maybe we can dispel that thought in this session today. Can advertising help people to navigate these difficult economic times? Or is it just going to be a case of those that cynically capitalise on people's suffering come out of it the best? Is there a dignified way to advertise in bleak economic times like this? So these are all pretty big, lofty-sounding questions. We'll try and keep it light-hearted. It's an intimate setting, so hopefully it will be a helpful and sort of positive chat. I'm joined today by Tara Austin, who is partner behavioural science at Ogilvy UK. I'm basically going to read your biography out now, if that's all right with you. So
I'm not sure I wrote it, so let's see what it says.
You could call me out, fact check any of this at any point. Do butt in. But with more than a decade behind her in brand and behavioural strategy at some of the world's biggest advertising agencies, Tara's worked for Coca-Cola, Budweiser, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tara considers herself lucky, you can correct me if I'm wrong, to have been at the forefront of the revolution in applied behavioural science. Going back to 2012, she designed and led the inaugural experiment for Ogilvy behavioural science practice, Cannes Lions award-winning project, which painted the faces of local babies onto shop security shutters to bring down antisocial behaviour in the wake of the London riots, which is a fascinating thought. I actually haven't seen these shutters, so I need to check those out. Tara now specialises in integrated behaviour change campaigns for clients such as the government, Recycle for London, Public Health England. She's also the host of Nudge Stock, which is the world's biggest festival of behavioural science and creativity. So I expect Nudge Stock this year was probably fairly economy forward, and maybe next year will be as well. This was originally going to be a panel session. Now it's just me and Tara. So I will open it up to...
I have noticed that they knocked off the bottom of the only bio that I have given to the agency. It says at the end, and she is something, 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 and a psychedelic evangelist.
Oh yeah, that's psychedelic.
So I'm not gonna leave that one out, because that's why whenever anyone says, "Do you want a platform?" I'm like, yes, I will take the platform, despite the fact that I wasn't meant to be here and the other lady is not here. So this is not a panel. This is somehow a conversation about inflation with a woman who doesn't really work in advertising anymore.
Yeah.
Or at least, I work in the behavioural science practice of an advertising agency, and the last ad I made was about trying to get people to not behave in misogynistic ways, which is very much not driving consumption in any way. So, but I'm brave enough to be here and talk about inflation with you all.
Thank you so much.
And I said this morning, if we're going to do this, it's just the two of us, that really perhaps we have to consider this more like group therapy in some way. Perhaps we can come out of this room feeling a little bit better about ourselves and our role in this industry, if nothing else, because I'm all for a bit of therapy at all times. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope so as well. So if you've got anything that you'd like to share, even if it's just a thought or a confession, please do keep that, in the barrel, and a microphone will come to you later on, and maybe we can all come out of this feeling a little bit more positive about whatever times we face this winter. We've just got a new Prime Minister, a new cabinet, so it's sort of a lot of things up in the air right now. So there's a big caveat on a lot of what we say, is like, we don't really know how hard things will get, I suppose. But yeah, just to start very broadly, what can advertising do to help people in these tough economic times?
I think the big question here is what is advertising? And I suspect everyone at this conference works in the creative industry somewhere, and I consider myself doing that as well. And like I said, I do make ads of a sort. But in your introduction there, you talked about driving consumption. And I like to think it's shaping consumption. I also, oh my God, I'm going to say the most controversial thing I could possibly say on this stage, and I'm running into it now. I'm a conservative. I'm a member of the Conservative Party. And I voted in the election along with a very few other people. I also care about people, and I have compassion, and I don't necessarily agree with the party or the leadership at any time. But I am a libertarian, and I do believe in capitalism, but I believe in that capitalism evolving, and I think we're the ones to shape it. And the reason I'm a member of any political party is because I would like to help shape that, rather than standing on the sidelines and saying it's not good enough. Which is why I work for the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group, which makes me extremely unpopular with all conservatives, interestingly. I'm damned on every bloody side. But I say this because I really do believe that together we can inform consumption and shape consumption, and that the means we have of communicating with one another to do that is not the evil bit, it's not the wrong bit, it's the ends. And if we're encouraging people to gamble, when they simply don't have enough money to spend, that's a terrible thing to do. If I was standing at a race course amongst a bunch of very wealthy people and encouraging them to gamble for the pure joy of doing it, knowing that they could well afford it, I wouldn't see that as a problem. So for me, it's never about the means. It's not about advertising in and of itself. It's about, what are we doing with that tool, the communication tool, in order to shape people's behavior, and in a capitalist system where what we do does affect people's jobs, and that if you're working for a business that has the right motives, that employs people fairly, then that business should triumph over other businesses that don't do that. And I believe that communications advertising has a role to play. Now I have to talk about what Ogilvy wants me to say, which is that not all advertising is advertising. And we've got a lovely paper out about the squeezed middle and inflation and how difficult it is for everybody, and guidance on what brands can and should do in that space. And it's pretty much the same thing that they should have done in the recession last time, and it's the same thing they should have done during coronavirus, right? It's be true to what your brand promise is, be authentic to that, don't try and dress up something that you're not. Be true to that, demonstrate empathy. I think that I was looking earlier at the fact that Octopus Energy recently gave people electric blankets, the people that they thought were going to be the most vulnerable and potentially suffer in this winter. And they sent them electric blankets. E.ON sent them socks. And kind of understanding the level, knowing the crowd, understanding people's suffering, and getting the tone right is going to be critical. So empathy, and then action, doing stuff. So the brand promise, being empathetic, actually doing something, whether it's electric blankets or whether it's, I think Santander have now, they're giving you money back on any direct debit with your energy bills. That when you do stuff, Iceland, that was the other one. Iceland made all their fruit and veg under £1, 1 pence. If you can afford to do it and you're actually being seen to act in your consumers' interests, you'd hope you'd get rewarded in the long term. But equally, this is about all of us staying afloat. And not everybody in this room is an employee or a business owner. They might be both or neither. But we're all in this. And I actually think one of the biggest things that any of us can do right now is try and change the frame, because this recession, inflation, all of this stuff it's psychologically draining. It's fear, it's the unknown. We're shaping a whole new generation of young people to grow up in a world where they just don't know what's going to happen next. And that's a pretty terrifying proposition, actually. So I think that the main thing we all need to do is try and frame this as positively as we can in a world in which we recognize it's difficult, it's hard, it's not good. And those frames of reference, in my own mind, I was saying to someone the other day, everyone's going to suffer. We suffered during coronavirus, and we couldn't see one another then. I suffered very badly in that period. I was on my own and really very, very lonely. And, not having money is one thing. Not being able to see anyone is another. And actually, in my mind, that frame of reference helped me think about this winter, that it is going to be hard, but at least we have each other in that time. And that's not to say that we can minimize any of the suffering, but those different kind of, how can we reframe some of these challenges in order to feel better about it, knowing that I think that's the biggest challenge we have, and it's the thing that's going to drive our economy downwards as well, the psychological burden. But then we've got psychedelics for that, which is why I'm up here talking to you guys today, so.
Thanks very much for bringing it back to the main topic of psychedelics. Yeah.
Sorry, Ogilvy.
You touched on a couple of things there that I'd quite like to pick up on. I suppose one of them was, it really struck me that there is a distinction here between what brands do and how they communicate that, of course. And so quite often when we're having these discussions with advertising agencies and people who, companies who work with brands, with advertisers, there's only so far that as an agency, as a partner with a brand, you can go. You can suggest, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So I suppose it would be quite good to break that down into things that brands can do in terms of actually changing their offering to sort of address people's concerns, and where that crosses over into the communications side of things and more the kind of the tone and the way that those things need to be communicated in a way that's appropriate to people in this sort of zeitgeist. So firstly, what kinds of things can brands actually change in their offering, and what have you seen so far that you think is good, or should...
Well, like I said, I think the biggest opportunity right now is in reframing, and I'd like to see a lot more. If I had the opportunity, I'd like to see a lot more brands putting things out there in an appropriate way that maybe reframes for people what would have seemed like a lesser option and makes it feel better. If you haven't watched Rory Sutherland, my boss, his talk on TED about intangible value of the brand, it's a fantastic romp. He's very good at all that stuff. But, we have the opportunity to shape perception in what we do in the creative industries. And that is valuable. There is a value there. And there's a value on a sort of spreadsheet in terms of the value that makes to the brand and how much people buy it. But it's also a value in just making people feel better about potentially difficult choices. Why hasn't somebody said, like, we're going to have defrost November or something? There's a massive amount of food in the nation's freezers, and as you will all know, the freezer is the first bin, because you put meat in the freezer and then about a year later you throw it away. And I know this because we do an awful lot of work with the Waste and Recycling Action Programme for the government, WRAP. And, it's just huge amounts of food waste, and it's terrible for the environment. It's really energy intensive, and it's just bad. But yet people don't really like frozen food. They don't really like going to the freezer. They don't really find it to be sort of aspirational, fresh, and all those sorts of things. Let's make people feel better about it. Let's make it feel like it's a social norm. We can do that in communications. It's about finding, like, where are the opportunities for us to act appropriately. Let's get people freezing their bread to use for toast and doing all these things that we really should have been doing for a very long time for the environment, but that we didn't. Now we've got this additional pressure. Can we make those things feel good to people or feel normal? Things that, as I say, were lesser and maybe not as aspirational. Let's make them feel good about doing those things. And we work with Sainsbury's, and they're doing this, they've got this smart shop piece now. And I don't know if any of you seen the comms around it, but we're using Stephen Fry, right? Why are we using Stephen Fry? Because Stephen Fry is clever and he's aspirational. He's not an idiot, and it's okay. It's called smart shopping, and it's using your phone. But here's the thing: it's reducing all the ambiguity of how much is this going to cost. Am I going to be afraid when I get to the checkout that I can't afford this? Instead, you can scan it all on your phone. You can make those decisions along the way. You can even pay on your phone and sort of scan out and stuff. But it's meant to be smarter. It's making you feel better about this. It's a bit of ego enhancement, which is what we all really need right now. But fundamentally, it's an action. It's a real, tangible thing that we're doing, as I say, to reduce that ambiguity, aversion, reduce the kind of the shock of the till and the shame that people might feel associated with that. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to really, really reduce the shame that people feel about not having the resources and the abundance that they would like, and that we can and should be using the frame of the environment of sustainability to tell people or to share with them that they're doing the right thing and the good thing and make them feel better about all of these choices, I think. Yeah.
So interesting, because I was going to ask about Sainsbury's, because supermarkets kind of spring to mind as and in fact they have been some of the first brands to really address the economy and the fact that people have less disposable income, and yet, supermarkets people have to go to supermarkets, they have to feed themselves. And so that is so fascinating to hear about the actual changing that, I suppose, the customer experience of understanding the emotions that people are feeling in store. And it's a great example of, going back to what I was saying about changing an offering versus communication, it's a great example of how Ogilvy have worked with Sainsbury's to change what it feels like, not just before you go into Sainsbury's, but while you're in there.
Yeah, real thing. I mean, I think we need more of that. And if we can help or encourage in any way brands to pivot their marketing spend into stuff that isn't marketing, that can only be a good thing. Rory often talks about how the San Pellegrino lid is not marketing. But yes, it is marketing, but it's not marketing. Stuff that's not marketing. And this value-based innovation is the way we talk about it in the business. But, it's more than the San Pellegrino lid now. It's not just a brand thing that makes you different and stand out. It's actually taking that a step further to be something that's really meaningful for people and helping them out. And, I never knew that if you pump up your air tires, then you're going to spend less in petrol. I don't have a car, admittedly. But the opportunity to be reminding people of this, of ways in which they might be appropriately able, and again, getting the tone right on that is everything. There's something in psychology called reactance, which is when you say to someone, "You can't do this," they go, "Fuck off." I think you'll find that maybe the Brexit vote had something in that spirit. You can't possibly leave Europe. Well, watch me. Didn't vote for Brexit, by the way. I'm a Conservative, didn't vote for Brexit.
We are in thanks. Yeah.
Those two things do tend to align with people. But it's interesting. Reactance is, I would argue, one of the most powerful psychological drivers that we have. We hate to have our freedoms limited. And so we've got to be so careful in how we communicate the limitations that people are experiencing, and just doing that with as much empathy as possible. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think there's a real role for very, very good research in a lot of these processes, but not research I'm not a big fan of focus groups. I think focus groups are great if you want to test a social dynamic. If that's what you want to understand, the social norms, but you won't get honest appraisal in a focus group, in my view. Better, like, there's platforms we're using a lot now. There's a great platform called Instapanel, if you want to do any kind of research, where people basically talk into their phone. You know, they make little video entries, and it's fab because you can actually, you know, you can get them to show you around their house. I've looked inside people's fridges. Where do you keep your milk and your frozen bread and all that stuff? But you know, you get very honest, intimate kind of answers from people, and I think having that video playback that you can share with a client and say, look, people think you're a wanker if you do that. Like, they really don't think that's a good idea, and I've got it on tape.
It's good.
I don't have
someone
to
else
say
to
it.
say that to your client for you. Isn't
How about
it?
how about these guys that you say are your consumers? Bad idea, let's not do it. But then we, again, thinking about the psychology of all this, you know, marketers, we're just people too. We have a lot of biases of our own in how we address these problems, and we want to always be seen to be doing the logical, vertical thing that makes the most sense. And part of the problem with that is what we often call sunk cost fallacy, how we invest in a process only to find out halfway down the line that it's going to fail or it's really not a good idea. And I think you know, if you work with brands, you've been in those rooms where you know you are throwing good money after bad. Now, no business right now should be doing that. I think a lot of businesses should be looking inside and going, hey, like, let's not do this. If it's now inappropriate, if the campaign we've had in the bank for the last 6 months, 8, 9 months, whatever, is now inappropriate, don't do it. Like, and it's not just for the reputational risk, for the media money, for all of this kind of stuff, but we throw good money after bad because we as marketers, as business people, don't want to, you know, pull back. And I think now is the time when hopefully this is a big enough opportunity to say, let's change our own business practices.
I mean, hopefully that lesson has been learned largely because of the pandemic. Everybody had to do that, right? 2 years ago. And I did want to talk about, I mean, I've been writing a little black book about various ways that brands can respond to what we work on in the cost of living crisis. I feel like that's becoming a little bit of an outdated term in that it's not an acute crisis, but more of a long-term recession in
Well, actually, this is interesting. So on the framing side, like if framing essentially means what your attention is drawn towards, what is your reference point for considering any piece of information? Because we're just not these rational actors who see a price and go, oh, well, that's a good price or that's a bad price. It's all dependent on the context that you're in. And I think there's like thinking more and more about framing, how we frame things, whether the price of how we anchor things. You'll all be familiar with TK Maxx putting the price on, putting a great big line through it, price anchor. Oh, I see that price. This is a much better price. Of course, there's no real need to do that. Could businesses right now be putting anchors down and saying, look, if we passed on the cost of this to you, it should be this price now, but we're not gonna charge you that. We're gonna charge you this. We're gonna hold the price constant. You know, creating that price anchor. Price framing is one thing. Looking at the other values, sustainability, all these other time saving. But I think probably one of the most critical things, and again for like the youth, is how we are framing this in terms of time. So you just said long term, right? And that's all the fear. The fear is all tangled up in this never-ending uncertainty that we're going into. You know, is there opportunity for people to bind this, for businesses to say, look, we're going to hold this price for X amount of time. We need control. We need certainty. The inflation itself is a symptom and a part of this psychology that we experience of like loss of control, which we just hate. And so to try and retain that control, maybe there is more we can do. Like, I could well see an advertising campaign that showed Easter next year and how it's going to be, and at least made people feel like this will end. It's not going to go on forever. Now, does that help the immediate short term? Does it help people pay their bills? No. The only thing that helps people pay their bills is Vladimir Putin dying, and us winning in Russia, but I mean, it's a seriously fearful situation. I just think that the framing in terms of time is also something that we should really consider, even if we're saying to people, we're going to hold this price for 1 week. We're going to give them, you know, these temporal landmarks. If we can do that, and brands in theory are trusted more than the government. So if Liz says it, who are you going to believe? But if Tesco say, we're going to keep the raspberries at £1.75 for the next 2 weeks, you know, even that might just help you feel a little bit. If you are counting every penny, okay, you're not buying raspberries, but baked beans, you know, if you're counting your pennies, knowing with some certainty that even the next month is going to cost you as much as it did this month, that will help people. It will help them psychologically, and I think there's a lot of value, as well as I say, doing stuff. Electric blankets, not socks. No, like reading the room right, but really, really doing things that can help people, if we can. Value-based innovation.
And again, it goes back to the crisis thing. I was going to mention, we've mentioned the pandemic already. You know, I was going to originally, we spoke about a question about the last recession, but I was a student in the last recession. I don't really remember any brands that were communicating and really stepped up to the plate at the time. I'm sure there were that won out, but just generally speaking, in terms of when the public feels like there is a challenge, a crisis, what kinds of brand behaviors win out in those? I mean, you've touched on a lot of this already before, but
I think it is same like this. Yeah. You know, being authentic to what your brand promise is, showing that you actually genuinely understand your audience and empathize with them, because the media has a lot to play in undermining big business, but business is business, and it employs people, and it puts food on the table, and we need that in this country. We need business in this country. We need people being productive and believing in the corporations that are doing the right things. Not all of them are. And how about we actually tax people appropriately and honestly? Everyone talks about tax all the time. Tax. Up, make the tax go up, make the tax go down. How about we just make people pay the actual tax that they're already meant to be paying? Radical. But, you know, provided, and I think there's an opportunity here for brands to surface that in terms of, like I say, if you're going to try and demonstrate to consumers that they should be buying your product over another one because it has an advantage. That advantage may be that you are paying your taxes in this country. I don't think we've seen that. We talk about fair trade. We talk about everyone else, you know, outside of the UK. But really, what are businesses doing here? And surfacing that could also be something that may be interesting in the future.
Imagine that. I'd love to see a brand just, they'd have to get their house in order, but
yeah.
say...
I mean, that would be a kind of rap battle I'd like to see. You know, imagine Tesco's and Sainsbury's going at each other for who's spending...
we're spending more money on your hospitals. Like, yeah.
You know, who's contributing the most in taxes? Because it sure as hell is not going to be Amazon doing that. And then how can we, you know, use our consumer power, not as marketers, as individuals, each of us, to contribute to the world that we want to see? I think, again, that giving people a sense of control over their lives, time-binding things, showing them that they do have power, even in the £1 that they can spend. Where's that pound going? All of this transparency. We talk a lot in the behavioural sciences about operational transparency as well. So showing that your product, actually just demonstrating to people what's gone into it. Why does it cost as much as it does? Have you got an incredible brand story that means that you are expending a lot of energy? Making people feel that that product is valuable is something that I think anyone can do at this time. I can't remember your original question now, but I'm just...
not sure it really was one. But I was we've touched on tone quite a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think of the sort of do's and don'ts of tone? Because it can really easily, I'm already starting to feel slightly patronized by certain ads out there.
It's so interesting. I did a piece of research I do a lot of work on like smoking cessation and getting people from these death sticks to other forms of nicotine. Pouches, by the way, you should all use pouches if you're smokers. It's amazing. But I did a piece of research on smokers and vapors, and it was interesting, like the language we use, where we were talking to people and saying, let's do this together. Like we're all, us, and or we were going top down, you should do this, and neither of those approaches worked, which we knew they wouldn't, but that's why research is really great. The approach that worked was just saying, like, we're ready when you are. Are you ready? Like, this is waiting for you. Total, like, I like to think of it as a little bit voice of neutrality, not telling people what to do, not imposing on them, not stimulating that reactance that I talked about earlier, that loss of control, not telling them what to do, but equally not going, we're in this together. You're not in this with me, unless you have a face to your brand and you have that kind of strength, or you have a founder story that means that people really are invested in you. Otherwise, just do not consider it. Like, but this tone of we are here and we understand the situation, I think is something that is going to be welcome in the next while. I was just thinking about tone. Like I said earlier, the last ad I helped to make was for the Mayor of London's office, and you may have seen it. It was the line at the end was "Have a word with yourself and then your mates." Now, the interesting thing about that campaign was it was trying to speak to men specifically about misogynistic behavior, even misogynistic language, like not sort of acts of violence, but when you see these behaviors in other men, the behavioral strategy was like, let's not talk to the guy, the perpetrator, because the perpetrator doesn't think they are a perpetrator. They don't identify as being a misogynistic wanker. So, like, us going, you really shouldn't do that, and again, inflaming this reactance I'm talking about, no good. What we said was that the appropriate behavioral strategy is not to try and change him, is to try and change the social norm in which he is operating, and to shift these other bystanders into being more active in dismissing that behavior. Now, the reason I bring this up is that is so difficult to get right tonally. How do you ensure that you do not inflame the male ego in the process, cause this reactance, don't tell me what to do, and play it right? We were very nervous in the campaign creation about, incels kind of coming after us, or, offending everybody in the process, offending women who, are the subject of this misogyny. But somehow, and I really believe it is a question of craftsmanship, and having brilliant creative people, the kind of creative people who are here, having creative people to work with who give a shit about the final product, who put their name to it and are genuinely invested, that means that you can hit the right notes. Equally, I think it's about having what they call red squads and stuff. Like there was a campaign that crossed my path in the agency the other day, and I called up the guy in charge, and I basically said, look, I need to tell you, I don't think this is going to fly. And I feel like I need to say Emperor's New Clothes right now. And I had to have it out with him, because you need everyone who comes across this work. Again, back to our own biases, it's much, much easier not to speak up, especially if you've all been invested in it all the way along, and you've seen the process that has got you to this bastardized idea. Like, we still have to then claw it back and go, no good anymore, or like, it's no longer, how we changed that word and this bit, and suddenly now it doesn't mean the thing that it did. I think, again, I wish my Ogilvy overlords weren't watching this, but we we put out a campaign a couple of years ago for Dove that was slammed because it was different shaped bottles. I don't know if you saw it, but I think it's fair to say that the agency was already pretty invested in the award film around that particular idea. But I think the real tragedy is that the idea took about 2 years to come to fruition. And in that time, it had become trite, or at least from the outside, if you didn't really sort of lean into it, it was easy to read that.
Keys back into a lot of what you've been saying about this sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost fallacy.
About
it wasn't a bad idea.
Yeah.
It was a very sweet idea, you know, and Dove really does put its money where its mouth is and invest, and, you know, but the problem was it was the execution at that exact moment in time had just shifted over into an environment in which it no longer felt appropriate. And it's just, I think, having more of those provocateurs and people who are willing to be uncomfortable.
But I have people like you in the agency who are willing to.
I'm fucking uncomfortable for everybody, I think. So.
But I mean, I wanted to like congratulate you on that Have a Word campaign, because genuinely, like, I saw it in my advertising bubble, but I also saw it in my like lads group chats.
Good.
Which is
well,
where
we're
it
about
needed
to do
to
the
end
next
up,
phase. We're about to do the next phase, which is going to be, hopefully, I think I just got signed off yesterday, on the enable phase. So like, how do you, this cultural norming piece, but actually what can you do, or what are the tools that you might give men in order to help call out that behavior? And the reference we've been talking about with the client is a fantastic campaign from Australia, if you've never seen it. Again, like dealing with the male ego, and it's for speeding and antisocial kind of driving with these young men, and lovely, beautifully crafted campaign. I think it won in Cannes. Beautifully crafted campaign. Young man driving very aggressively. Women on the side of the road looking at him and going. And this is, and the end line is like, nobody thinks big of you. And everyone in Australia refers to it as the Pinky campaign. But what's so powerful about that is you're actually giving people a tool, a meme-like way in which to call out the behavior of others when they see it and when it's inappropriate. And doing so in a way that is, in that case, basically funny, light-hearted, and kind of works with / right against the male ego and you know, your sense of masculinity. So fantastic campaign, and I have high ambitions for the next phase with the Mayor's Office, see if we can do something similar here.
Awesome, I'll watch out for that. I realised that we're actually nearly running out of time, and we did mention that it was a sort of therapy session, and
mostly for me though. I thought we were going to have some questions.
I hope you feel that you've unloaded a lot of things. But does anyone have anything that they want to share or ask? I say share or ask. It doesn't have to.
It's really worth having a look at the paper, by the way.
Abby, are you good with the mic? Sorry to pounce. Yeah. Does anyone have any thoughts on how brands should be acting? Right. Oh, there's this guy here, and then we'll come to you. Yeah.
Ogilvy.
Yeah. Really interesting talk. I think you talk a lot about the responsibility of the brands and the people that you talk to on the brand side. A lot of the time it is brand marketers, but maybe not brand decision makers. How do you navigate that challenge of talking to the right people to make the right effects and change in there that isn't just using up the marketing spend, but getting the brand to put a commitment to it?
Oh, the silos, right? Fucking hell. I mean, if I had the answer to that one. I'm fortunate in that I sit in the behavioural science practice. And so I sit between worlds. And I'm a consultant now rather than, you know, a strategist or anything. And so I think that gives us license to try and solve problems in new ways. And I think half of the time, it's all the same principles, like avoid reactance, avoid making people feel they're limited, enhance their ego, and in the case of the marketers, make them feel like, oh, this is a new process, this is a sexy new agile thing, we're doing a consulting new model of doing this in a different way, and it's going to be really effective and efficient, and like to try and sort of, rather than criticize the fact that someone actually doesn't have the power to make something happen in their little silo. It's, can you really truly get them on board with a different process, or in order to go up that chain, because ultimately that's the only way we can make these bigger smart shop type things happen. But it does challenge existing business practices, and it depends who you're working with. I think everyone now, though, has the ambition to be those better marketers. So it's just, how can we really dress it up in a way that does that? But I wish I had all the answers for that.
That's a good one, though. There was someone over here who was keen to ask a question, and then I'll ask.
Yeah, it was only a short question, which is, do you feel that people have lost trust in not just politics, but also in advertising? And obviously, when brands come out with an incentive to do good, people generally question the underlying motive, and I don't necessarily personally think that that's a bad thing, that a company can align their interests with the interests of people, but I just genuinely think that people at the moment tend to focus more on what's the underlying motive for the organisation, as opposed to there being maybe a parallel between the organisation and people in general. But what do you think about that?
Exactly right. And there's a model called the trust equation that I have put in front of no less than, I think, about 4 brands this year alone to make this point. I won't tell you which brands they are, but bloody big brands. And they've listened. And the model basically says trust is driven by credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. How safe do I feel with you? And credibility and reliability are pretty rational factors. You can say, like, we are, big old business has been doing this for a very long time. We're totally reliable, and all our products are standardized in this way. And if you buy your baby milk from us, then whatever it is, like, we've got this kind of accreditation, and it's all quite rational factors, which again, marketers are really good at dealing with those rational factors. That's why they always want all of those descriptions on your ad. They want to talk about, this is the product point, this is the product point, this is because it's quite easy to manage that. Intimacy, less so. Do I feel safe? Do I get the right language? Do I match you? Do I demonstrate that empathy? But the thing is, those elements are all in the model divided by credibility, reliability, intimacy, divided by self-orientation. And self-orientation is, are your motives aligned with mine? Because you might have done all of these things, and I might have even in the past felt this way about you. And we know this in our interpersonal relationships. If you were a shopkeeper and you'd always delivered, and I knew your family and all of these types of things, all of those things might be great, but in this particular instance, I might feel that actually you want me to buy this product because you're in a competition with another shopkeeper and you really want to prove something to him, and actually you want me to spend over the odds because you've got a sort of secret other motive. And in the case of brands, do you want to take my money? How aligned are you? And when you talk about sustainability, are you really talking about sustainability, or are you actually just talking about your own bottom line? This idea of self-orientation and how aligned are our interests, it underlines everything that you do, because the brain is the most complex object in the known universe. Every single one of you is more complicated than the stars. We are amazing. And it means, she's amazing. She is amazing. You're amazing. You're amazing. You're amazing. We're all amazing. And we are fantastic bullshit detectors. And we've kept alive as a species because if you might have been all of those things to me, but actually in this instance, you want to poison me. That's self-orientation. What are your motives? And we are always looking out for that as the real bottom line. And I cannot stress that enough. So the only thing I think we can do is keep surfacing this to our clients and say, people don't ignore everything else you are. The context of everything matters, and it's putting that on the table and trying to have some uncomfortable, emotional, psychological-led conversations, which I'm in a fortunate position which I get to do with them as much as possible, rather than just focusing on the rational elements that we can all easily deliver, but which add up to an ad that falls flat, is a waste of money. And frankly, nobody should be wasting any money right now. So if your ad's no good, if you've made an ad and it's in the bank but it's no good, tell everyone you're going to put that money into the food bank.
Right, totally. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're going to see some of those brands acting with decency in the next few months and really stepping up. And I thank you so much for taking the time and speaking so eloquently on this. I hope people feel a bit more positive that there will be...
We got this, guys. We got this. It's going to be short. Think about Easter.
Yeah.
Think about being with your families. Think about the fact that you can touch and hug at one another. And even though things are going to be horrible, you know, our grandparents got through the war. We can do this. We can do this.
Yeah.
And it's going to be horrible, and we have to help one another in that process. Dunkirk spirit and all that.
Nice, I like that. All right, hopefully take that positivity with you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.